Okay, finally, welcome to another episode of Kuden Radio. Dai-Shihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts. Got Sensei Alexander in the background. Had some tech glitches here trying to get started, but hopefully everything will work out for us. Anyway, so you watch the master teacher move. Maybe it was Hatsumi Sensei. Maybe it's Nagato Sensei, Noguchi, whatever, right? Maybe it's your own teacher, right? And the movement looks effortless, right? Looks natural. These are kind of, I don't know, buzzwords within our art, right? But the point is they look almost like simple, maybe too simple, right? So you watch more closely, right? You look at the hand position, you pay attention to the angle, the timing, where he moved, what he did, right? And then you go back to your own dojo, or you get with your training partner, right? And you try to reproduce it. But here's the question. What didn't you see, right? Probably lots of things, right? But for our purposes during this episode, what you didn't see the decades of work before that moment. You didn't see the amount of times, the repetitions that teacher worked that technique. You didn't see mistakes. You didn't see the corrections, right? You didn't see the hours spent working with kamae, distance, timing, striking, ukemi, whatever, right? We talked about this in the last episode. You didn't see the thousands of punches or kicks or grabs or whatever that were received, right? The thousands, maybe not thousands, maybe hundreds of bodies that contact was made with, right? That were felt, okay? Not in a bad way, right? The moments where something didn't work, right? And that master teacher had to figure out why, right? So what I'm getting at here is you saw the answer, right? That demonstration is the answer. It's the end product of a lot of work, a lot of understanding, right? But what we don't see when we see a demonstration is we don't see everything that made that teacher capable of producing that thing, that answer, that movement. And maybe that's the hidden half of martial arts training, because the movement you see is only half the story, right? But I would even go farther than that to say that the techniques, the models, even the stuff written in the scrolls that everybody holds sacred, right? Maybe that's only half or part of the story as well, right? And if all we're doing is copying what we can see, then we may be missing, like completely missing, the training that made the master a master, right? And that's what we're talking about today, right? So stick around. I'll be right back. And see you on the other side.
The big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to Kuden Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
All right, welcome to another episode of Kuden Radio. So this is episode 315 for anybody that's keeping track, right? We are the Warriors, or the Warrior Protectors podcast. For the serious folks that martial arts isn't fantasy land, or it's not belt or trophy collecting. Not that people can't do those, right? But this is for those folks that see this as an important piece in kind of a double-edged goal, right? anybody knows this character Fudomyo from our Mikyo training, his right hand, and also Manjushri, right? This representation or symbolic character, right? That represents the transcendental wisdom. And I know how that can sound woo-woo, but what it means is unconventional. It's the ability to see what's really going on and not what everybody thinks is going on. Okay. So it's not an alternate reality. It's just, anyway. So what both of these characters carry in their right hand is a double-bladed sword. And the idea is that it can cut in any direction, but its purpose is to cut out illusion, right? To cut through illusion and to cut our own fetters and kind of the ropes and chains or whatever that kind of hold are, connected to anchors that are holding us back, right? So it's for those folks that are very clear about, they're either working on or they have created, right, the life, or at least a big part, right, of the life that they've wanted to live, right? And so that gives this a place, right? Not for entertainment, not for I don't know, confidence maybe, right? But for protecting that life, right, from whatever and whoever might threaten it. And I get it, right? That sounds noble. It sounds ideal. Of course, we can all nod to that. Yep, that's why I'm here. Okay. Well, if we are, then there's a lot that we need to be able to. There's a lot we need to understand about what's going on and not going on in the cultural divide, we'll call it. Okay. Because, most people are training in martial arts that did not come from a Western background or Western mindset, right? So, coming from China, Japan, Korea, whatever, right? And there's a lot more to that than we might understand at first. I'm going to cover a little bit of that, but that's not the hidden problem, right? I think the thing I'm going to be talking about during this episode I was just at a seminar that Rob Renner, he's one of the Bujinkan Dai-Shihan that he's lived in Japan for 21 years, and he's gone to class 4 to 6 days a week consistently for those 21 years. Okay. So not only is that a lot of time, but if you know how much the classes are, I've never asked Rob, if he's independently wealthy or has printing presses, printing money in his basement or whatever. That doesn't matter. My point is, he has trained with all the master teachers. He's trained with Hatsumi Sensei a lot. He translates for these people in class, right? So I went because, one, he invited me, and two, the way he's covering things is something that I think I might learn a thing or three from, right? Because maybe he can fill in a couple of gaps. So we're all always learning, right? So don't this rank thing or position thing of Dai-Shihan or what. There's always something next, right? The path does not end, right? So this week we're continuing a conversation that, quite frankly, I don't think we have often enough in the martial arts, especially in the Bujinkan. And today's topic grew out of a couple of things, right? One was last week's episode, right? We talked about how copying the master won't make you one, right? If you haven't listened to that episode yet, you don't need to stop this one and go back, right? But I would highly recommend listening to it, because these are like two sides to the same coin, right? And some of the stuff might even sound, if you're a regular, might even sound familiar, right? Because the difference between the two is last week's looked at the master and the techniques and what we're trying to get from that, and how just imitating them isn't going to get us there, right? This one is going to take a look at something that this is one of those like hidden in plain sight kind of things. Okay. So again, last week, right, we talked about the problem of watching a master teacher. I don't care. Hatsumi Sensei, Nagato, Noguchi, Manaka, doesn't matter. Isuzu Sensei, whatever, right? Your own teacher, whatever, right? But watching them and believing that the path to becoming like them is to learn to reproduce their movement, right? To copy what they do. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. I mean, after all, in the Shuhari framework from ancient Japan, right? We've got copy or preserve, we've got break, and we've got transcend. Shuhari, right? So I'm copying them. But what are we copying, right? So, and last episode, right, I pointed out that there are things that you can't see, right? There are experiences you can't see. There are lessons you can't see. You're not inside their brain looking at things the way they are, right? Which means you also have no sensory connection to this contact that they're feeling and what they're feeling and what they're looking for, right? So years of training, years of development, years of understanding that you cannot see, okay? Things that happen before you ever walked in the room. And since these guys are in their 80s, could be things that happened long before you were twinkling in daddy's eye, whatever, right? But the point is that these things are influencing what the master is doing right now, what this master teacher is doing right now, right? And after that episode, I had a couple of conversations, right, with, again, Rob Renner, right? And for those of you who don't know Rob has been in Japan for more than 20 years, okay? Again, he's trained extensively, almost daily at different points with different Japanese teachers, right? And he trained a lot with a couple of the ones that are no longer around anymore. I mean, obviously, Hatsumi Sensei is retired. He still has conversations with him. But like he trained with Oguri Sensei a lot, right? Oguri Sensei's gone, right? So that influence is gone unless you get a chance to train with somebody who trained with Oguri Sensei. And he had very specific like ways, because the point isn't to become a clone, right? This art and the way the process works is we're supposed to be able to get to a point where we can do exactly what they do, but not look exactly like them. That's not the goal. Okay. Train with Seno Sensei. And so we had conversations about who were good teachers, who were bad teachers, but that is not connected to how or what they were like with their practice and how close they were to what Hatsumi Sensei was doing, or which aspects of the art they focused on, and then everything else fell into place from there. Okay, because Nagato Sensei does not move like Noguchi Sensei, but all the principles are there. Oguri Sensei didn't move like Seno Sensei. All the principles are there. Okay, and that's I think people miss that a lot, and I get it, right? We go to Japan, we go to a lot of classes, and we're trying to pick up as much as possible. What I'm trying to do with these most recent episodes, these recent trainings, is to help maybe tune your eye, because some of you can't get to Japan. Some of you maybe can't even get to seminars or whatever, but you're looking at YouTube videos, you're looking at these other things. And for those of you who have graduated past the, ooh, that was cool kind of thing. Not that we all don't have that feeling, right? Oh, that was cool, right? But some of us go from, ooh, that was cool, snapping right into, why does that work? Not what he do, because I can see what he did from my perspective, right? I'm looking at a two-dimensional screen. I can only see so much, right? And he didn't duplicate it, or chances are he didn't keep changing angles and whatever, right? Often demonstrations are done just so it, the people that watching this way, right? Even on our Zoom things, are seeing the technique this way because it shows a lot. But some of us will turn so that the uke's back is to you, or our back is to you, or we'll change to off angles or whatever, because change the perspective, you see something different, right? And so anyway, right? But again, so Rob isn't someone who went to Japan for 2 weeks, right? Came home and is now explaining Japanese training culture to everyone, right? I mean, it's not him, right? So Rob's one of those guys who has lived this, right? Anyway, and now he does things his way, I do things my way. But what's interesting is that we can have a conversation and go, okay, well, you're using these terms and I'm using these terms, but we're getting our students to the same point. And that's the point, right? But again, he and I got into this discussion about training. Well, multiple discussions, right? About training, about students, about the importance of somebody like being a good uke. And for me to train, I have to find a good uke, right? Because we talked about the benefit of having a good uke and knowing this person's a good uke. Okay. That does a lot for your training. But then you know what? So does having a bad uke, right? So I'm actually going to hold the uke thing for another episode. I'm going to touch on it here or there just because it's still important in what we're doing, what we're discussing during this one. But this is so important. It's going to become its own thing. And I know in the past, the recent past, I've discussed the importance of an uke, but yeah, there's more to cover. But anyway, right? Discussion was about what we see missing in a lot of practitioners, right? And we talked about techniques, we talked about drills, we talked about understandings and misunderstandings. We talked about what Westerners don't understand about Japanese culture and how that influences expectations in a Japanese dojo in Japan, or maybe even a Japanese dojo run by a Japanese person here, and how Westerners tend to do things differently, even though, and especially those who think that they're doing it exactly like they're doing it at Hombu, or they're doing it traditionally, that kind of thing. But again, that word traditional can really screw you up, right? But again, we talked about techniques, drills, those kind of things, right? And somewhere in that conversation, I realized that we were talking about the exact same problem that I discussed last week, right? Just from the other side, right? Because last episode, right? What I say, right? Last week I said, don't make the mistake of copying the master's movement and believing that copying the movement will make you a master, right? So I think everybody got that, right? But here's another question. If copying the master's movement won't make you a master, why would copying the master's class, structure, presentation style, format, the class itself, why would that make you one? Okay, think about that. Okay, because that's what a lot of us have done, right? Unknowingly, unintentionally, right? It's not like we went to Japan to go, you know what? How can I screw up my understanding of this stuff? Nobody does that, right? But we went to Japan, or we went to Taikai, we went to Daikomyosai, we went to these seminars with these master teachers and whatnot, right? And we trained, right? We trained with Soke, we trained with the Japanese Shihan, right? We didn't just watch the techniques, but consciously or unconsciously, we also watched how the classes were conducted, right? Teacher demonstrates, everybody watches, bow, you'll work with your partner, right? Teacher demonstrates something else, everybody watches, bow. Right? You get the idea, right? Maybe the teacher walks around maybe correct something, maybe grab somebody and show something else, right? And then there's another demonstration, right? Another henka, another idea, and then what? Well, we come back to our own dojo, right? And we recreate not just the techniques that were demonstrated, but we end up recreating the format, the way the class was done, right? Rob has his own term for hombu classes, right? I just see them as just the same thing as any other seminar anywhere else. That's why I call them, when I tell people, like, when you go to hombu dojo, right, you're training seminar style. That means they're throwing a whole bunch of things out, and sorry, a lot of it's for entertainment. Okay. A lot of it is for inspiration, motivation, those kind of things. What there isn't is step-by-step instruction. Step 1, step back with your right foot, right naname, into Seigan no Kamae. Step 2, right? None of that, right? Usually, there are no drills, right? Repetition drills, spontaneity drills. And if there are, it's sparse. It's few and far in between, right? We talked about how other martial arts outdo us in the drill department. And this is not a knock on Bujinkan, it's not a knock on anything, right? The teachers, nothing like that, right? They're presenting things a certain way. And we're going to get to this when it comes to culture. But we both agreed. Tai Chi, Taekwondo, all these guys, boxers, right? We tend to not scoff at those things. We understand, like, they're really, really good at timing, distancing, angling, those kind of things, right? And their drills help them do that. But their drills help them do that because they're focused on a very specific type of fight, a very specific type of outcome, engagement, those kind of things, right? The reason we don't take that approach is because it's limited. There's a whole bunch of hindrances wrapped around it and things like that. The fighters are not bad fighters in their realm, right? So people need to stop scoffing about, I do Bujinkan or I do ninjutsu and those other things suck. If you don't do your stuff well enough, they will wipe the floor with your ass. No matter what people want to believe, and I know how that can make some hearts sink and some lumps in throats happen, and even people click away from things like this or decide they're going to stop listening because they don't want to hear it. Training's supposed to make you uncomfortable. So there's that. But if we're not careful, we end up recreating the format of the class, not just the techniques that were taught. Why? Well, because that's how they train in Japan. Okay. But is that actually the training that made them capable of doing what they're doing? The sensitivity, the ability to, sense danger coming from a blind angle, dealing with multiple attackers looks like it's just as easy as friggin', dealing with a single person, right? Or, right? Are we actually looking at the visible expression of a much larger developmental process, right? And mistaking the visible part for the entire process. Like, he's demonstrating techniques. They want us to learn the techniques. Well, that must be the point of training. So that's what we're talking about today, right? That's what we're talking about in this episode. The hidden half of martial arts training. And actually, it's probably the hidden third, but I don't know. There can be lots of halves as far as I'm concerned, right? So what's the hidden half? The hidden half, excuse me, are the training methods, the repetitions, the drills, the mistakes, the resistance, the uke, the independent practice, the research, the experimentation, the thousands and thousands of interactions with different size, shape, bodies, right? The not always doing things the same way. Talk about that later on, right? All of these things that are supposed to transform a technique, a kata, that we consciously know, that we learned. We're introduced to this thing, right? Here's Goku, here's Renyo, here's Seion, here's Tangeki, here's Nichigeki, here's whatever, right? But to transform that thing that we consciously know, that we're started off with, right? We got the step-by-steps into something that you can intuitively feel your way through, right? When nothing happens the way it did in the kata. Okay? Because as Hatsumi Sensei has reminded us, nothing is fixed. Okay? Budo is not that simple. Right? We are going from form to formless, right? That's where things are just adaptable and whatnot. But formless is, in Mikio would say, it's entering the void, right? It's just pure potential, right? He said these things in many different ways, right? Not teaching you how to fight one person, I'm teaching you how to fight the unknown. Okay, there's a lot more to things than just starting with, that thing, or just the practice. I mean, anyway, right? Nagato Sensei has reminded us over and over and over again, right? If you listen to the translator translating for him in class, he'll say, do this, do this, do this. Of course, it's case by case. That's his phrase, case by case. What that means is you're going to adapt to the attacker because the attacker is going to do what the attacker does. Our assumptions about what he should do or what attackers do, it's bullshit. Okay? They get in the way, right? So how do you develop somebody? How do we develop ourselves? Right? In a way where that person or us, right, can actually function case by case when nothing is fixed against somebody coming full bore who will fix themselves instantly every time you do something, right? One of those big topics is Kazushi, right? Balance breaking. Well, we've talked about that, at least on a Whiteboard Wednesday, okay? The translation for balance breaking for the word Kazushi, it's very conventional across martial arts, but it's also it's a beginner step, right? It's a bike loaded with training wheels, because Kazushi, the kanji for writing Kazushi, points to the collapse or attacking or removal, more specifically, the removal of that which requires the structure to be strong. Hatsumi Sensei has often demonstrated and talked about breaking someone's balance, Kazushi, but not letting them fall down. Okay? Breaking their balance in a way where they're still standing. Okay? So we can do it spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically. You can do it financially. You can do it, right? All kinds of things. But it's not about the balance breaking. It's about removing that which the person needs, right? The structure, what makes the structure work, so that the person can be strong, so that they can be fast, so that they can, whatever. Okay. And this thing, when I say that somebody, the person you're dealing with, the actual person that you're going to be putting one of these techniques on, that you're moving in kamae, that you're doing uke nagash, uke uch, whatever, right? All these things on. I'm not talking about you not being able to do it because you and them are in a pissing contest and they're just going to defeat what you're doing, right? And you just need to be better. No. I'm talking about the brain being superbly right? Amazingly proficient at solving for these little things that our techniques do. Okay. Beneath conscious thought, the brain will make the body fix. It'll make it solve for X is what I've been saying lately, right? It'll make it fix the problem before the person consciously recognizes that there's a problem. Like the foot will move before they think about needing to move their foot. Okay. They're feeling the sensation like logically, right? Intellectually, left brain, right? That's, oh shit, that's over there. Meanwhile, the brain, which is why we need to explore the techniques way more than step by step, because if we're not, you don't have to understand like the science of proprioception and things like that. But if you don't understand how a technique is feeding conflicting or contradictory input to the brain to where it, one, cognitive overload happens, and two, it doesn't know which of those things to prioritize. So at the very least, it slows it down, gives you an opening or whatever. Then, right, we're learning choreographed dance steps a la martial arts more than we're learning how to control another human being's body, because that's really what it comes down to. Right? They were much more harsh back in the early 80s when I started training. I know I'm old, right? But one of those things was, how in the hell can you think that you're going to, and I'm sure I've said this in the past, right? And probably very recently, right? How can you even imagine that you're going to control somebody else's body when you can't control your own? And I don't mean the assumption that I can control it. Okay. So that's the question, right? And I think we need to talk about it. Okay. What's missing when we're doing technique only training? I don't care how many Henko we do. I don't care. Right. And maybe by discussing some of these things, we'll actually come to an understanding what Henko really are. Because far too many people use the term Henka for a bailout, right? Well, it wasn't there, so I had to do this thing over here. Okay, that's not a Henka. You still put him down and all that kind of stuff. That wasn't a Henka. That was something else, right? I'm talking about a slight variation in the flow of things that still allows us to continue doing what the technique says we should be doing. And I don't mean step back, uke nagash, chop him in the neck. It's not that. Okay. Anyway, all right. Before we jump into things, James, my ninja in the background there, who's on? Who should I be saying hi to? Is the audio quality coming across okay?
Yes.
Things glitched for me twice before I could even get on. So hopefully things will stay the way they are. Okay, so what do we got?
Looks like Dave, looks like Alan, Kyle, Carl.
Kyle was down in Maryland with me at the Rob Renner seminar. That was cool.
We have Carl and Greg from Australia, and Maury as well.
Did you say Carl's on?
Yes, Carl.
I was making a big deal when Carl's on because, like,
Yeah.
Hey, Carl.
Carl and Greg are on, both from Australia.
Oh my God! Now all we're missing is Kelly from New Zealand. Was there somebody else from New Zealand last time?
Yeah,
Wasn't Kelly?
it was Carrie and Nick.
Carrie, yeah, Carrie, not Kelly. Carrie and somebody else, right?
And Nick, I think it was, from New Zealand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. I'm always impressed when people on the other side of the planet can make it. So, anyway, all right. Any questions or comments up to this point?
No, sir.
Rather than hey, yo, what's up? No, nothing like that. Okay, fair enough. All right. So, that being said, get back to my notes over here. All right. So, let's start here, right? You watch Hatsumi Sensei do something, or whoever, right? I'm just using this, right? And I've talked about this many times, right? I've experienced it directly, right? I've been uke for Sensei, right? I've felt him move, right? I've watched him do things from a few feet away, right? Where I could see right? It could actually see what he did and still couldn't explain what happened. Okay. I remember, I remember multiple times or several times being in class, and Hatsumi Sensei would demonstrate something, and then he would explain it, describe it, right? And he'd look at my direction, and he'd go, "Understand?" And I'd go. Meanwhile, everybody else in the room was like, "Oh, yes, Sensei," right? And I just got this look, and he'd just look at me and point and just laugh, right? Because he knows, looking at this thing is such a small piece. It's like a hint. It's not the thing, right? Anyway, he would just laugh because what I've said in the past was, I see what you're doing. Duplicating it could be a whole different matter. Okay. I mean, I see the step kind of things, but what I can't see is how you're affecting them, because often a teacher has to exaggerate something, which would be too much in a fight, right? But they have to exaggerate it so you can see it. And if we could understand that the kata on the scrolls are exaggerated forms so we could see what's going on, but that done that way, it's not going to work against somebody trying to kill you. Why would they write these things in? For the same reason that the teachers had you start out making a big block letter A and a B and whatnot, and then you change over to cursive, and then, whatever, you develop a signature out of that, right? But anyway, so again, I've watched him do things, right? I've felt it, watched it, whatever. Okay. I think a lot of us have experienced that, right? If you've been to Japan or you've been to Taikai, Daikonya size, whatever, right? I'm sure some of you had the same experience, right? You see it, you saw it, right? And yet somehow you didn't see it. How's that possible, right? And what do we do? Okay. This is not a condemnation of anything. Rob and I were discussing this, and he covered this a lot. Like when I went to the seminar, Kyle can attest to this. He and I had sidebar conversations in the actual training. When I was training, my knees and hips got the better of me at one point, and I was, watching from the sidelines and making mental notes and whatnot. So it was his seminar. He was teaching, right? I put myself in student mode. I wasn't contributing to that seminar unless we had like a little round robin and, what do you have or whatever. We just had these little sidebar conversations, dinner, Saturday night, whatever. Okay. So, again, none of this is a judgment of anything. It comes from a realization that has to be had for us to get over certain things that where we're wired to do the opposite. Okay. And the more we can know how we're naturally wired, like caveman wired, everyday average person, cultural wired and whatnot, right? The more of those we can find and the more of those we can be mindful of, the more we can get to what's really going on, right? So here's the thing, right? When we see something, we think we know what it is, or we know, I didn't see it, whatever, right? What's the natural thing to do? The natural thing to do is that we start looking at and focusing almost exclusively on the movement, right? Okay. His foot went there. He turned this way. His hand was here. No, wait. He didn't grab the wrist. He had his hand on the elbow. No, I think it was the shoulder. That kind of thing, right? Everybody's trying to reconstruct the event, right? Like we're examining some strange. Anyway, if you ever watched the movie A Clockwork Orange, that comes to mind, right? Or things like that, right? So, but again, we're trying to figure, back and to the left, that kind of thing, right? We're trying to look at things frame by frame, right? And that's normal. That's natural, right? We're trying to find the secret. Okay. What's the trick that makes this thing work, right? And sometimes, yes, right? There's an important detail. Sometimes you missed an angle, that kind of thing, right? Sometimes you missed the hand position. Sometimes you missed where the weight was, whatever, right? Sometimes you missed the right? The interval, the gap, some people just call it distancing. It's way more than that, right? Those things matter, right? I'm not saying they don't, okay? But if the thing you missed wasn't in the last 5 seconds, this is brain wiring. This is what left brain is able to hold on to, right? If it wasn't in the last 5 seconds, how do you fix it, right? What if the thing that you missed happened 30 years ago? I've been in this art for a long time. I started in this art in late 1980, early 1981. I've been around the block, I don't know, a time and a half. Okay. So what if, right? What if what you're seeing right now is the result of thousands of hours of training that created a capacity you don't yet have? What if our understanding of the basics is off? What if what we think the basics aren't the basics? Okay. So you saw Nagato Sensei move. You saw Noguchi move. Back in the day, we saw Seno Sensei move, Oguri Sensei move, whatever, right? What didn't you see? Right? You didn't see the thousands and thousands of punches that came in before that one. You didn't see all the different body types. Tall guys, short guys, strong guys, weak guys, fast guys, stiff guys, whatever, right? The guys who overcommitted, whatever, right? You didn't see the guys who pulled the punch. You didn't see the guys who moved strangely, right? You didn't see the guys who did exactly what they were supposed to do and the guys who didn't, right? You didn't see all those cases, right? That they would have had to have seen and gone through to have the failures that allowed them to develop the understanding that went from intellectual, watch out for this, to intuitive, all based on feel. Because you don't have time. If anybody's ever been in a real situation, you do not have time to be pulling Technique 27 out of your Rolodex or whatever the hell they call them these days. Okay. So, you didn't see all those cases, right? And then Nagato says on a regular basis, it's case by case, right? And we write it in our notebook, case by case. Very profound, right? I got it. Got the secret, case by case, right? Or sensei, right? Nothing is fixed. Oh, thank you. Nothing is fixed, right? But do you understand what you're hearing? I didn't. These things are hard-won lessons, right? Working on something now, Shihodori lines of movement. That is a fundamental principle, but I'm sure that many times that I heard Shihodori, and it was this reference, and I'm not going to be teaching anytime soon because it's a critical basic and it's a detail that whether I heard it in other words or not, it's a precision thing that I need to get before I'm going to be presenting it to anybody. But my point is, here's this critical piece, and I'm sure that it was what was meant many times that I heard Shihodori, and my brain automatically went to a kata, right, in the Moguri Gata scroll of the Kukishinoryu that's called Shihodori. Well, shit. Okay. So again, but do we understand what we're hearing? Because what if case by case isn't simply a philosophical statement, right? What if it's a description of an accumulated capacity? He's felt enough cases that he doesn't need every case to look the same. He also understands that no two things are going to be the same. I encountered this was a Hatsumi Sensei teaching way back, right? Early 80s, where he talked about this thing. Like every time he moves, at least then, right? I intend to do the perfect kata, but something changes. Okay. You get the same training partner. You're working together for 10 minutes. Every time they throw the same punch, it's still not the same punch. It's like the difference. They would also say things like, if you're gonna do reps, right? We would prefer that you did 3 repetitions of what? Chino kata, Ichimonji no kata, whatever, right? 3 repetitions, then 50. But most people who come out of Western fitness, no. You get your reps in. Okay? Yeah, the problem with that is that after 3 or 5, whatever, right? The muscles that you're using become fatigued before you even realize that you're fatigued or your arm is tired or your leg is cramped, whatever, right? These things keep changing. And so after every rep after that point has diminished capacity. Not that you're not doing it the way you think it should look, but we're firing secondary and support muscles to make up for the thing that is now weak. And so now we're not doing it correctly because we're not supposed to be using those muscles, because that puts us into a position that a killer on the street can exploit, right? So again, when we do a drill, how long do we drill? When we work on a certain piece, right? Whatever, okay? So again, there's lots of these little things, right? And this is different, right? The beginner wants the attack to look right, right? Punch like this. No, not like that. Grab the wrist. No, the other wrist, right? That kind of thing. And like that's appropriate for where they are, right? Step with that foot, right? And why, right? The why, we've talked about this over the course of the last 3-4 episodes, because the beginner needs the problem to match the answer they remember. The beginner is working on, I know they think they're working on defending against another human being. They think they're working on defending against a punch. Okay? So the ego wants to think. But what they're really focusing on, and why we do the same things the same way, is because they need the reps in to wire the body. So muscle memory now knows where to go and how to put the body parts, so left brain doesn't have to think about it. So we can free up that bandwidth for the next piece. Okay? So it's not about the partner. I know the partner's throwing a punch. That's just an index point for me to line this thing up with, right? But it's not that the person is not ready for self-defense or fighting, because we're all naturally hardwired for fighting and self-defense. Some are naturally better at it, some are not. Okay? Why are we in this art? I think all of us, or most of us, could agree that we're in whatever art we're in this system because we're looking to be able to survive better, faster, easier, with less wear and tear on ourselves, that kind of stuff, right? To have more options than he does, a greater advantage, whatever, right? But most people can grab somebody. Most people can, slash or stab with a knife or whatever. The question is about not can they do it, but are they efficient? Are they effective, right? Can they do it without getting themselves cut to ribbons? That kind of thing, okay? But the beginner needs that condition to stay the same, because they're not ready for variation. They're not ready for variables, right? The problem is that people end up than believing that that's the point. Of course, every level thinks that it's the level, right? But the experienced practitioner begins to recognize patterns, what we might call families of problems or groupings of problems, right? Pressure, balance, direction, commitment, distance, timing, right? So the attack can change, right? But they recognize something familiar, something universal, right? The principle inside that change. That was a question that came up. I can't remember. Kyle probably remembers, but I can't remember. It's a little round table Rob had at the end of each day. But he he was talking about going from same thing I've been talking about, right? Going from the forms, right, to like mechanics, right, to dynamics to get to the principle. And not because you memorized it, but because you can't not see it, right? And so one of those things is mind, right? Mind, which people often see as like distance or whatever, but it means gap. It means interval. There's a sense of rhythm to it, things like that, right? It's feeling that gap, feeling that how much time it will take to cross from A to P or whatever, right? And the question was, well, if that's the basic, right? If that's the principle, why the hell are we doing all these kata? Why are there all these kata? And some people stared and some people poked at it, whatnot. And I just kind of tossed my hat in the ring and said, because the form can change 100 times, but the principle doesn't. Right? And we need to be able to see that before we can create that. Right? So again, right, they're seeing this familiar thing inside, right? And then the master, and then the Tatsujin, right? Doesn't necessarily need the situation to resemble the technique at all. Right? People often just stare at me, like deer in the headlights kind of thing, when I say, or when I describe how to use Ichimonji no Kata in an argument or against a pushy salesman or whatever. It's not a fight, but conflicts still exist. Pressure, manipulation, an attempt to conquer or get you to, to capitulate, right? It's still the same. So how do we do that? Right? Eventually we end up responding to relationships, right? What's happening now, right? Where's the pressure? Where's the balance? Where's the attention? What's he trying to do? What's he capable of doing next, right? What else? What's already been taken away from him, right? What do I have available to me, right? Again, there's Nagato's thing, case by case, right? There's the Hatsumi Sensei's thing. Nothing is fixed because all of those things change one little aspect of it. The whole thing changes, okay? But here's the problem, right? Again, we're going to fix this, right? That's why we're here, right? If we don't identify the problem, right, we don't get over ego believing that it's got it, and right, I get it. We are all proficient. We are all good at what we do. Awesome. Okay. Problem is that there's people out there that are much better, or the situations will be so random or so surprising or whatever that we're not going to have time, right, to go down through the checklist and what did Sensei say and that kind of thing, right? And we're going to have to be able to make up a solution on the fly without giving a flying fuck whether or not that's allowed in our system or whatever. Okay? Because ultimately, all the principles are the same. And I've talked about this before. There are people that are masters in other martial arts that look on the outside completely different from what Bujinkan people look like, from whatever, right? But the way they're working the basics, timing, distancing, angling, so tired of hearing or saying those things, interval, all that kind of stuff, right? Still the same. Okay, if we could just get past what it looks like, Like what he told me was, and he used these words. Yeah, I heard the words too. Did you hear the inflection? Did you see the eye movement? Right? Have you watched the past 5 things that he's done when this situation comes around or in relation to those people? Those words mean jack shit, or at best 15% of everything he communicated. All right? We have to be careful, right? So here's the problem. The problem is that we want the master's freedom, the master teacher's freedom, right? Without necessarily doing the developmental work that created the master's ability to navigate the freedom, right? It's an ego thing. Again, it's natural. This is natural human living, right? We either recognize it, or if we've recognized it, we have to accept it. And if we've truly accepted it, then we're going to be mindful of when we do one of these natural things that will actually hijack our training. Okay? Because if we want, I'm not saying that's you guys, because you guys are all enlightened, right? But if somebody wants that kind of freedom and ability and whatnot that the master teacher has and whatnot, but then I'm willing to do the developmental work, right? What they're really saying with their actions or avoidance or chosen ignorance or whatever, right, is I don't want anything fixed, right? Right? So we want to be able to say nothing is fixed, right? Before we've learned to control anything and develop the abilities that will allow us to adapt to what exactly is going on and not what we think is going on, not what the kata says should be happening, not what we assume should be happening, anything like that, right? And usually what ends up happening, if you've ever been in a real situation and you've used the stuff that you've learned, okay? Because, again, I've talked about this in the past. There's people that have never, ever been in an altercation, okay? They're learning a martial art for whatever reason, but let's say they're learning for self-defense, right? They've never been in one. So what they have are news stories or assumptions about, he throws this thing and I do X, Y, Z and wipe the floor with his ass. Okay? Not a bad goal, but they don't understand how many different types of punches, how many different angles a punch can come in on, how many different intensities, or if the person's taller than you, how that's going to affect the trajectory of the punch, right? Even an uppercut, right? If somebody's my height and they're throwing an uppercut, probably gonna hit me in the breadbasket, right? Probably gonna hit me in the solar plexus or the gut or whatever, right? If the distance is a little bit different, well, no, they can't hit that. They're gonna have to hit me in the jaw, right? But if somebody is James's height, right? If somebody's taller than me, for them to hit me in the gut with an uppercut, James, what do you think? Okay, be kind of silly, right?
Yes.
If he did the same motion with his arm and the same body dynamic, that uppercut, right, gonna hit me right in the gut. All right, not gonna hit me in the gut. It's gonna be in the jaw. Okay, and if I've done something and I've folded or whatever, it's gonna be in the face or whatever, right? For me to hit somebody in the jaw, I need a certain amount of distance and whatnot, right? And I have to, right? That's going to travel farther, right? Uppercuts tend to be in closer and boom, right, where it's underneath what's going on, where they can't see it and stuff. So again, all of these things change things. But it could be an uppercut, right? But it could be one of these tight ones. But how many different angles, and it's still an uppercutting kind of shot, right? What if it's an inverted one, right? What if it's not the standard boxer style, but it comes up this way? Well, shit, how's that fit in, right? So again, there's a lot of work to be done. Okay, I can't speak for, won't speak for, and can't help those who aren't willing to do the work. Right? That's not why we're here, right? We're here to talk about maybe not knowing what work needs to be done, right? How do we do things in a way that we can actually learn what the past masters were hinting at when they started with this big model, right? Inserting a kamae at a certain point, right? This guy's got a knife and he's just hacking, slashing back and forth, right? And we can't back up because I'm here to tell you, if you're dealing with somebody like that and you can run, fucking run, okay? Do not engage with somebody with an edged weapon unless you have absolutely no choice, okay? So we're already assuming that we couldn't make a better life decision or better life choice. He's already made choices for me that here's how I have to go. And this is the difference between having a fighter mindset and having a warrior protector mindset, right? Or me being a civilian and me being back in that world where Carl's still in, right? Roll up on a scene and stuff like that, and you can't haul ass. Got to hold the scene, right? First on scene, you got it. You can't, you can't do a lot of things, right? So it's different, right? Here's a cop thing, right? On duty, rolling up on a scene, that's a variable. There's already variables affecting and influencing not only my decisions and how I'm going to act and respond, but policies, procedures, mandates, and things like that have already influenced those decisions and operating methods before I even pick how I'm going to start moving, right? But when I was off duty and on vacation, I'm not in cop world. Something starts to happen. Check, please. Yeah, but that's my job when I'm doing that job. It's not my jurisdiction. And I'm not skirting responsibility or whatever. I'm in civilian mode. When I was in the military and I was in soldier mode, whole different. All three of those have completely different constraints, limitations, variables, things like that for the exact same scenario, the exact same attack, the exact same weapon. Right? But see, even watching demonstrations at home booth, we broke out weapons or we did unarmed or whatever. None of that stuff is discussed. Lots of room around us in the dojo, right? Nothing about, if I break this guy's balance in the wrong way or I don't affect him right. I mean, he's going to weasel himself out, but, I try to manage him and whatnot, and he bounces off. And I don't mean in a bad way, like I'm going to make him bounce off the car. I mean, right, I deliver that shot, lands, bounces off the car, and that car actually helps his structure rebound faster. Or he's against it, and then he can push off and add that to what he might naturally be able to throw at me. You see where I'm going with this, right? So we want to be spontaneous, and again, this is normal. This is natural, right? We don't skip around it. Don't take this as judging you or whatever, right? We all do it. Okay? The trick is knowing that we do it, right? But we want to be spontaneous before we have anything reliable to spontaneously draw from. Okay? And this is where I think a lot of martial artists get stuck. Okay? Especially experienced martial artists, right? Because if you've been training for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever, right? You know a lot of techniques, right? You've seen a lot of things. You've attended how many classes? Jesus Christ, right? You've attended seminars, right? You've got notebooks. I've got notebooks. Holy shit, right? You've got videos now, right? For how many decades, right? If we had YouTube, the people can just doom scroll, one technique after another, right? Right? You've trained with good teachers. That's all those things are good, right? But when the attack changes unexpectedly, there's still that moment, that hesitation, that little mental search. What do I do? Right? And sometimes you find something. Sometimes you force the technique you remember. And sometimes you just move and hope. Right? And you wonder, why doesn't this feel like what I'm seeing from the teachers? Okay? Maybe the answer isn't that you need another technique, right? We covered that last episode, the episode before that, okay? Right? Maybe the answer isn't that you need to see another Henka. Maybe you don't need another seminar. Maybe, right? Maybe there's an entire part of the developmental process that you're not paying attention to. And not just because you can't see it in a demonstration, but because you don't see it in those class formats. And so therefore we arrive at the assumption we don't do that in our art. Yeah, we do. Those classes at Hombu are not designed to be structurally developmental. Classes at Hombu being taught by 80-year-old master teachers. I don't care if it was 20 years ago and they were 60 or 30 years ago and they were fit. Right? They're designed to have you test your basics. Can you duplicate what the teacher is doing because you know what the teacher is doing? Not, I'm seeing the demonstration, so I should learn that step-by-step pattern. Maybe, but that's what we covered last episode. If I'm at a developmental stage where I'm copying the step-by-step, right? Years ago, oh my God, I'm not even going to count, right? It's probably close to 2 decades ago. I was in a class at Hombu, one of the Gato Sensei's classes. He called me out to be uke. I did this thing, right? And just did it. I stood up just like I would normally do. Stood up, demonstrated again from a different angle, stood up to do it again. And I think I did it 3 times. And then I went to do it again. He went, no. They don't need to see more than that. Okay? No one in this room should need to see the physical mechanics more than 2 or 3 times to get what you're actually doing. Not the moves, what you're actually doing. Okay, so got over to my partner, right? And we didn't even get like halfway through one for us. And he, okay, show it one more time. If they can't pick it up, like people weren't even getting the step-by-step. He said if they can't get it with this one, then they don't deserve more demonstration. They need more work on whatever. Okay. So again, not ringing my bell. This was just one of those things where the teachers say these things, and if we don't get past our own assumptions that we understand what we're looking at, they're not asking us to understand the step-by-step. They're showing the step-by-step to see if our basics are solid enough to duplicate that and adapt as our partner. Because what's the chance that my partner, who is stockier or taller or whatever, is going to throw the punch, even if they throw a straight punch, ski, whatever, right? What are the chances they're going to throw things exactly the way Sensei's uke did when that person has a different build, different height, different level of experience, whatever? What are the chances? It's not going to happen. Okay? My partner's probably at a different skill level, body size, whatever, right? So starting position relative to me, even if they start nose to nose, right? If they're broader than me, a punch is coming in from a different angle, right? if they start off at a different angle, whatever, right? So again, maybe the answer is we don't need these different things, right? And this brings us back to the question we're going to keep asking again and again and again, at least through this episode. What didn't you see? Okay? You saw their movement. What didn't you see that made that movement possible? Because if you can begin answering that question, right, you may finally stop trying to reproduce mastery and start training the things that actually produce it. Okay? All right. Anyway, before we go any further, let me stop there for a moment. So for those of you watching live, right, what are your thoughts, right? Have you ever watched one of the teachers, thought you understood what you saw, and then tried to reproduce it later and realized I had absolutely no freaking idea what made that work? Been there. Been there, right? So drop in the comments. James will translate for you, right? And if you're trained in Japan, right, I'm especially curious, right? What was one of those moments where you realized the lesson wasn't necessarily the technique that Sensei demonstrated, right? What did you take home that changed the way you trained? Okay, so let me know, right? And we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes after some people get some things in, right? Don't forget, where are we? October, right? And if you go to onlineninjaacademy.com/events, right, you will see the summarized version of the information for fall camp, right? Do I have that right, James? October 16th, 17th, and 18th. Should probably have that in my head. Yeah, 16th, 17th, and 18th. Okay. So it is the hidden lessons of the sword. Okay. So yes, we're going to be doing some stuff with sword. Lots of people are already like chomping at the bit, and they're all feeling all warm and fuzzy and all that kind of stuff. But let me be very, very clear. It's not a sword seminar. Okay. It's not an intensive about the sword. We're using the sword to highlight 7 or 8 critical principles that are the basics. We're using the sword because I think the sword makes these things more obvious, but we need to identify them and understand these things are universal so that we can find them in everything else that we do. Hanbo, knife, unarmed, whatever. Okay. And I think that if I focus on sword, people will be attracted to it because it looks cool. Okay. So we're going to use the sword to uncover the lessons, but it's not a sword seminar. So here's what I am contemplating at the moment. I'm thinking about, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do this yet. I'm either going to do a multiple week, like one class a week kind of thing, via Zoom for anybody's long distance, in the dojo for the folks that are obviously local, where we're going to do a sword course. Because to do the fall intensive, there's certain things you're going to have to be able to do. There are going to be prerequisites that you're going to need to be able to do in handling a sword as the uke, as the defender and whatnot, right? They have to be there, right? You have to be able to do these things to be able to hit the ground running, doing what the fall intensive is really about. Okay. So not sure if I'm going to do it that way, or I'm going to do a couple of prep classes that will get those things out. So if we do prep classes, they'll be wired into, like if you sign up for for the fall intensive, then they will be included, right? Here are these things. You got to do these, or, you got to at least be able to look at them and go, oh yeah, I can do that. Okay, I can do that, whatever. Okay. Or just using them as a checking kind of thing. Or yeah, and we'll know very quickly, right, whether somebody's sword, whatever, stuff is, the basics are what they need to be, right? So again, we'll talk about this in another upcoming episode on how the uke's job is not to give this person a turn so they can practice the technique. The uke has a heavy responsibility, and the uke actually has to have a skill set equal to or better than the person that they're helping, or they're not helping the other person. And they have to know what level, what intensity, right? How to help. Rob framed it a really good way this past weekend, where he was talking about, at one point he was talking about how the uke are also a sensei. What that means is, if the uke is doing something, and let's say the tori, the defender, is rushing things, their timing's not right, their kama, whatever, their attention is somewhere where it's supposed to be somewhere else or whatever. Now we were doing multiple attacker stuff at that point, but the big thing was the uke should stop and not go on to the next thing until the tori is where they're supposed to be, doing what that part of the technique is supposed to be doing. Otherwise, the rest of it won't work, right? Kyle, remember this. He kept going back to the cracked or broken egg analogy. Okay, you're working through a technique and you realize, shit, okay, it's failed, right? So for my upper level people, I'm like, you need to be adaptive. So if you feel something starting to go, then you need to adapt to that so that it either turns into something else or you reclaim that thing or whatever, because you're not going to be able to stop in a fight. But if you're just learning something brand new, then absolutely, right? If the egg cracks, if the kata gets broken, if it's not working, you don't go, okay, well, let's find that. Okay, now start. No. You can't put a broken egg back together again. Okay, we all know Humpty Dumpty, right? Okay, not the canon, the fairy tale, right? So you just start again because everything was lost at that point. Okay. So anyway, but thinking about the uke as a sensei, I just did this with a youth student tonight, right? We're just working on the shifting back into kamae, and I had him do these swatting counter strikes, just attacking the arm kind of thing and getting this thing done. So we did a stationary thing. I just had him work on the te sabaki, right? The hand arm movement kind of stuff, right? And so I just held the target out, and he stayed in kamae, and then he just practiced this kind of action, right? This kind of thing. So the strike occurred, but the arm never left the toku shielding position, right? It's a phrase from sword work, which is going to come up a lot during the full intensive, right? This whole idea of the weapon is also its own shield. It's also the shield, right? So whether we're unarmed or whatever. So I had him doing this thing, and then I had him. The next phase was I came in with a punch, and I had one of these square striking targets on my arm. And I came in, and I had him move right to his position, and then strike. Right, so move, be grounded, strike. No, that's not the way it's going to be done in a fight. Right, get that. We got to build things. Right, everybody wants to jump into this one, but see, these were drills. These were micro drills for proficiency. And then I had him go to, okay, move and do the strike. And as soon as he switched to that, everything fell apart because the focus was so much on this that kamae broke or the angle broke or whatever. Okay, great. So what I did was I applied this and I've always done it. This was just Rob's way of describing it. So it's cool, right? So I'm gonna borrow it, right? So what I did was, like I usually do, I go, okay, nope, no counter strike. You're not allowed to do the counter strike until your kamae and your angling are correct. Kamae, angling, distance, whatever. No kamae. So punch, he moves, and then I go, okay. And then he goes back to the teisabaki. Great. Okay. So let's do it again. Right. Go. Okay. Once we got to that thing where he got better at the positioning and all that kind of stuff, where things were landing and it was solid and whatnot. Okay. Now let's put it back in. Okay. Move, strike. Move, strike. Not strike while moving. Not, those kind of things. Right. So he was doing that. And I said, as long as you're doing that, as long as you're doing it correctly, then I will allow you to continue practicing that at that level. If that breaks, we're going to go back down to the other level where you have to come my right before you're allowed to do this next piece, right? Same technique, same waza. We just, I don't know, what would you call that? Drillifying it, right? But it had confines to it because it wasn't that I was restricting him. I was not allowing him to practice something that was shit. Right? Quality over quantity. Right? If what you're doing here is wrong, I'm not going to go, oh, that's just wonderful. It's just amazing. Right? No. Your counter strike, the fist should be touching the arm, one, while the arm is still moving. Not too early, because he'll ride that off and be back in the fight. Right? Not too late, because it's already retracting, you're going to miss it. Right? So there's a certain timing for that. But there's a certain distance so that it actually has effect when it lands. Otherwise, I'll end up trying to overdo it. Right? And that opens things up. All kinds of things. Right? So, right? It's, no. We're going to stay at this level and get this right before we try to, right? I know you want to do it like I did it, but you can't. And there's a reason you can't, right? So until we can get to a point where Kamai's landing solid, right? You got this thing. Then we can start putting this in, because the next lesson is this should be touching the arm at the same moment that my foot is touching the ground, not touching the ground, touching the ground, touching the arm. Okay, for those of you on audio only, I apologize. I'm just beginning the touchdown kind of thing on each of these. That way, as I sink into the leg, right, the hip moves and all that, and I'm grounding, the arm is extending through that. That's what generates a significant amount of power. Not pain, compliance, not whatever. Might it hurt? Sure. But I've been in lots of things where somebody felt the pain later, but they were so enraged, they were so drunk, stoned, whatever, that pain compliance was not going to work. Okay. All right. Anyway, so James, what do you have? Anybody decide they were going to contribute to my craziness tonight?
Kyle put in, I think for me, it was Hiroshi Sensei's class when he was demonstrating Kazushi. When I first watched, I thought it was about where he was touching the uke. It took a while for me to realize it wasn't about where he was touching. It was about the amount of pressure used and the timing between the interactions that actually took the person's stability away.
Yeah, and you didn't even feel it until it was too late. Right? That was a big thing about this past weekend too, right? If he can feel it, if it's too much, then he will absolutely consciously do it, right? I need to have him in a place, in a position where everything's fine. Everything's fine. And then all of a sudden it's not. Because again, everybody tends to relate. We're martial artists, right? So everybody tends to relate to things that are happening with the body. Timing, distancing, angling, that kind of thing, right? But there's timing up here. Okay? Audio only people, I'm pointing in my head, right? There's timing here. The point between thoughts. Right? How much time does it take to process the information? Unconsciously, subconsciously, consciously, that kind of thing, right? There's distance up here, right? The time it takes, time is distance, distance is time, right? Between different functions, how long does it take for him to get from one place to another, thought-wise as well, okay? How long does it take, or what's the distance? And again, I know this sounds abstract, but you do things, you have certain successes, failures, whatever, and you come back and you think about that. And then, well, at least I do, right? Rob does. You start looking into things, right? We do. We look into the science of it. Like, right? How does that, right? If it's physical, then it's, well, this is connected to that via this muscle, tendon, chain kind of thing, right? Whatever, right? But there's a distance timing relationship, this right? This rhythm interval kind of thing, right? It doesn't fit well, right? With like Western just set words, right? Between him knowing he's being affected and that moment where the body starts to collapse and instinctively or consciously he tries to adjust and it just keeps going. It's not helping him, right? There's a distance, right? There's an interval between that and an emotional doom and gloom, oh shit, kind of sensation. And these are things that if we don't explore them and we don't recognize them, we won't see them in the playful, helpful training partner interaction, but they're still there. We might not describe it as doom and gloom because my partner's like, oh shit. And they know they're going to the ground, but they know you're not going to kill them from back there. It's class. In actual combat, this is not the technique over. This is not, I went to the ground. This is shit. Like okay. This stuff, this is Budo. Right? This is not just winning an engagement, winning a bout, getting somebody to tap out submission-wise. Okay? But it could be. Okay? I make reference to Drunk Uncle Bob, family picnic, right? Okay? And I get him in that same position, and then he goes to move, or I adjust a little bit or whatever, and I guide him to the ground. Okay, are you done? You done? That kind of thing, right? So he knows it's over. He knows. Might take him a couple of FUs and whatnot to let it sink in, but there's a point where the person knows I'm done. Not it's over, I'm done. Those are very different things, right? You can't learn that from the technique. You can do what I'm doing now and academically or scientifically explaining it, but that doesn't help in an actual situation. What helps is knowing when you're there, knowing it's happening. Okay? Those are very different things. Those of you who are in, like I said, law enforcement, military, whatever, okay, you've probably been in enough situations where you can feel these things, you can sense these things. Right? The trick, if there ever is a trick, right, is to not ignore that you got to bring that into the dojo. You got to bring that into your training. Okay. You have to look at techniques from all right, so even if it's Ichimoto no kata, right? Okay, so I receive this, and then this is coming in. there's a whole lot of shit between when that fist starts to move to deliver that shuto to the neck. There's a space that has to be covered, physical space, distance and whatnot, right? But how do I slip that in before the brain will automatically adjust and bring an arm up to block or whatever, right? How can I do that in a way that that catches his attention in the wrong place? And how do I develop my strike to the point where I do not have to apply more force? As a matter of fact, I should be able to apply less, a lot less. But when that strike makes contact with that target, the doom and gloom thing happens. And if it, like, instantaneously, and if it doesn't, it's because he's already unconscious and dropping like a stone. So it happened like momentarily, but things were fading and he probably never felt it. Okay. There are questions in here. Okay. Here's a model. But what do we have to know and be able to do to get between these points more than just physically? Because this guy's got a brain. Okay, we can assume that he's an idiot because he attacked me and I got shit for him. He's got a brain. And even if he's a moron, his subconscious, primitive, and lower mammalian functions will correct his body for balance, inertia, all kinds of things, right? Instantaneously. How are the kata showing us, at least in the beginning, right? And then that will point to, because once I figure out how to get this in, that shaves off some time, and my partner now may flinch, but the way they flinch is primarily saving this, but they can't get the blocking arm up in play. Oh, okay, great. Okay, now I need to drill that because there's a certain timing to that. There's that thing. I need to be able to drill that so it gets into muscle memory, right? Not as an option. All things are options. Not as an option. Okay? As a spontaneity level option that our own system will toss out because the conditions are right. Because if we have to think about it, and this is one of the conversations I had, because he's done his study into things, I've done my study into things, and it's really funny. We were talking about this stuff and how we studied things over here, we studied things over here, and we studied things at different times, and we ended up arriving at the same point, right? Which is kind of cool, kind of interesting as well. But anyway, I talked about proprioception earlier, which is the feedback and stuff that goes to the brain. But that spontaneous kind of thing, right? So if you've ever bumped your arm into a door on the way through, right? Who would put a door frame in such an obvious place, or we get pissed off because we're not paying attention or whatever, right? But there's things to be learned from there. One of which is, look how quickly your body recovered, even though your brain was focusing on, does that hurt, how much, or you were pissed off or whatever, but your body recovered very, very quickly. Tripped over that crack in the sidewalk, recovered very quickly, right? Other people are laughing at you, you're worried about that and stuff, but everybody glosses over how freaking quickly the body righted itself. Cool. Awesome. Fantastic. His body's going to do the same thing. All of that writing of things while your brain was busy being pissed off, laughing at yourself, right? How'd I miss that? Right? Whatever. The 100 little micro adjustments that the body made And the brain fired those things beneath conscious thought. By the time you realize that you did it, it's long since over. Do it driving, do it bathing, we do it whatever, getting dressed, all these little adjustments to not fall over, right? Never give any thought to. Okay. This is where certain types of drills come in. There's there's drills for each of these areas. There's also drills to practice certain aspects of a fight because you can't practice the whole fight. One, you're probably not going to fight your training partner the same way that you would end up fighting against some guy trying to beat, break, or kill you, right? Two, we can do sparring, but inevitably there's always rules. And if there isn't, okay, right? Fight Club sounds amazing until somebody loses a couple 100,000 bile cells and they're, freaking mushroom in their head. Okay? So anyway, cool. Anyway, James, anybody contribute to anything?
No, that was it. Other than Trinity jumped in, said hello.
Awesome. She'll be in class tomorrow. Okay, so actually, for those of you who are regular students, local, online students, you're not online, but my long distance students who do things through Zoom stuff and all that. If you're tuned in or catching up via like the Nimpo master classes and things like that we do, you'll see these things happening. But I was talking to Kyle about this on the way back from the seminar, that I'm always thinking about how to help students get from where they are to where they need to be quicker than I got there, as quickly as possible, right? Compressing things, okay? And really getting a handle on these basic principles, okay? And we had a curriculum, or not a curriculum, a lesson plan format that it was 2 iterations ago, I think, maybe. Because I've tried different things because students need to work on skill repetition. Students need to work on those things for proficiency. Students need to work on techniques so that they can explore in and test their basics and stuff like that, right? Because all kata are nothing but strings of basic movements, timing, distancing, angling, rhythm, those kind of things, right? They're just strung a different way, right? So I think we're going to be shifting back to one of these layouts. The curriculum's not going to change. The weekly class focuses, right? So what we had before was several days a week. We had this A day, B day kind of format. So A days, we worked on structure, okay? So we worked on, if we're doing ichimonji, we're doing doko, whatever, right? We're doing these things, and we're doing technique, that kind of thing, right? B days are drills on the exact same things, but we're going to pull something out and we're going to drill for timing. We're going to drill for how distance changes things. We're going to drill for reaction, those kind of things, because that's where the proficiency comes in. We're getting away from the step-by-step, breathing some life into things, because now it's about the dynamics. Okay. And so I'm going to be doing something like that. And I might even combine it with a month 1 and month 2 kind of thing, where we're working on the same things, but month 1 is more of, here are the skills, right? The kamae, the striking, the stuff that people don't do because they don't think we do it in the Bujinkan, because they don't do it at Hombu. Yeah, that's true. Hombu is not a Shidoshi or Shihan's dojo where the structure should be teaching the students to get to a point where they can look at the master teacher's demonstrations and test their ability to recreate it, because they have the fundamental building blocks. Okay. So what that means is that month one would be, the pieces, right? So if we were working on techniques, we wouldn't get the techniques until week 3, because week 1 would be about the moving the kamae and maybe the uke and the gash, right? Catching that thing. And week 2 would be about catching it and responding with the kazushi part, right? To make it not possible for him to move in the direction he originally intended to move easily, right? That's kazushi. That it's disruption. Okay, disruption of structure. That doesn't just mean I broke his balance, because you can break somebody's balance and half a second later they've recaught it. Okay, if I missed the opportunity, shit, we're back to ground zero. We got to start again. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm doing something in a way that momentarily makes it impossible for him to continue in the same direction. That presents a window and an opportunity. Okay, so we work on that part of it, and then by week 3, then we're working. Well, then what's week 4? Week 4 is review on the things that individual students need to work on, and it's prep for people that are testing that month. Okay, month 2 would be working on strike defenses, whether it's punches, kicks, whatever, and grab defenses, right? So 1 month, we're working the hell out of the individual skill pieces that these things are built on. These things then are twofold. It's like a double-edged blade. They're testing one's ability to string their basics together in a certain flow, an unbroken flow, smoothly to create an outcome. And they're also teaching fight logic for controlling his attention, his ability to get at you, the timing, the rhythm, those kind of things, right? So this is a developmental thing, not a, today we're working on this technique. Today we're working on, okay, what part of it? And not just randomly, right? Okay. So again, I don't have it restructured yet, but that's, yeah. Because my goal is, again, helping students get where they're going faster, regardless of where they started with me, right? Somebody comes in, they're brand new. Okay, great. Here, okay. Somebody comes in, they're up here. Okay, great. Let's test where you are. And then, okay, great. Now we can do this. Okay. Or let's say somebody's done a lot of rolling and whatnot. And I go, great. Okay. So now what I want you to do is I want you to do a roll. And as you come out of that roll, I want you to be delivering a punch that would knock somebody back away from you. Not come out of the roll and then punch. Okay. Exiting the roll so that the timing delivers that strike. Good. That was awesome. Okay. So now you have that. Okay. So now come out of the roll doing a front stomp kick, doing the exact same thing. Okay. The person's either going to be able to do it or they're going to go, note to self, I can do everything up to this point. That's where I need to work. I need to find the timing. I need to find how my body needs to move. I need to know whether the distance is right as to whether I can do that or not, or whether what some people consider to be stupid, there's a togakure thing where you're coming out of a roll and you actually double plant stomp kicks on them. Okay. Well, it makes no sense in a static start. Doesn't have to make sense in a static start. You have to be able to learn how to do it and control your legs so that if I'm rolling and somebody's moving in on me, I know whether or not I'm going to be coming out of the roll and delivering the kick. I'm going to be out of the roll and a kick is an option, or shit, I'm never going to make it out of the roll. So I'm going to put my body in a way so that at that position in the roll, this creates a moment in time that I can side roll, get out of there. And everything's in context instead of look what I can do kind of thing. So anyway, hopefully James isn't having technical glitches over there. Anyway, all right. So I'll come back to any other questions or comments that popped up along there, but let me just get back to my notes. So, all right, let's do this. I want to look at something that Japanese teachers have said to us for years. Okay. And that is, don't try to get this now, right? Catch the feeling, take it home, right? And you're going to work on it from there, right? And I think in our attempt to make sense of those words, a lot of us ended up or may have completely misunderstood the assignment, right? I'm making air quotes for the guys on the Apple podcast and Spotify and you guys that are out there in audio only land. Okay. So, again, so let's talk about that phrase, right? Or maybe it's not one phrase, right? Maybe it's a collection of phrases we've heard over the years, right? Don't try to get this now. Just catch the feeling. Play. There's one, right? But ultimately, like, let it influence your training. Okay. And if you spent any time training with Hatsumi Sensei or listening to people talk about their experiences training with Hatsumi Sensei, right? You've heard some version of this. Okay. If you have the book, Understand Good Play, there's a lot of this woven in there, right? There's a big section up front that Ben Jones, I think it was Ben Jones, who edited the book, because it was just out of their notes, where Hatsumi Sensei at one point taught what he meant by understand, good, and play. Each one of those words. He had a certain expectation, right? And a certain meaning behind each one of those. It wasn't just understand, good, play, right? They're actually a flow. There's a karmic chain in there. One is a question. The second one is based on what he gets back from the question and an assumption he will make about you because of your answer to that question. But ultimately, he's still going to tell you to play. And what is play? It's exploration. It's spontaneity. Okay? That doesn't mean you just throw a bunch of shit around, but it does mean that you need to figure out how to figure out what's being taught. There's a cultural nuance that we don't have in the West. Okay? And that's why I think a lot of Western students have struggled with it. Because, again, what does that mean? Right? Catch the feeling. Okay. Which feeling? Where is it? How do I catch it? Is there a net? Okay. Okay, that part's a joke. Right? But and because we don't necessarily understand what the teacher is telling us, right? Sometimes we turn it into something mystical, right? Sensei's transmitting the feeling, right? Rob and I are having this conversation because he's been in Japan, right? He lives there, right? So he sees people come and go and whatnot, right? And you know, he has this thing where he'll ask people, so you've been here for 2 weeks, or you've been here for a week, or whatever, right? So what did you get from classes? Oh, catch the feeling, and it's kind of right. It's the feeling of the art. It's the feeling of the moment, right? And look, right. I'm not going to tell you that there isn't something deeper happening in training, right? I think a lot of you know me better than that, right? I spent decades studying Mikyo. I spent decades exploring consciousness, right? Perception, intuition, right? The things that exist beneath our conscious awareness, right? So I'm certainly not the guy who's going to tell you, if I can't measure it with a ruler, it isn't real, right? That's not what I'm saying, right? But I think sometimes we make something mystical or I told Rob this week, and I use this a lot, right? A lot of these cliche or a lot of these comments that they started out as a teaching tool and people started out trying to get it. But they turn out being shortcuts and they turn out being cliches, right? Like, well, we can't really talk about it because, like, it's the feeling. What the fuck does that mean? Anyway, okay. because right, I think sometimes ego makes something mystical or makes something complicated or whatever because that person hasn't done the work necessary to understand it mechanically yet. Okay, it looks like magic, right? I remember when I was in the military, I pulled armorer duty for a while. It's the person who's in the armory with the weapons, and people come and sign them out, and whether it's military police duty or they're going to a training thing or whatever. And anyway, I was on duty one time, and I was reading one of these computing magazines, right? So we're talking like mid to late 80s. So some of my IT guys are going to start laughing now, like, holy shit, right? Do you have a RAM chip that barely held? I mean, what you guys have on your phone, 1,000 times more powerful. But anyway, I was reading this article about this new computer that I think the Tandy company came out with, whatever, right? But anyway, it came out and it was cutting edge, right? And a lot of folks were like, oh my God, wow, it does that, does this, whatever. It seems like magic. And this person that was being interviewed from, I think, whatever the company was, right, said, and again, it's a borrowed quote, but still stands true. So it's not original to him, but I just remember this is the first time I bumped into it. And what he said was, yeah, I can see that. Anything significantly advanced cannot be distinguished from magic. Okay. But it's the same thing with a magician, right? We watch a magician wear it all, and how do you do that, and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay. But if we study magic, if we study illusions, if we study sleight of hand, if we study these things that are necessary for that trick to happen, it's not magic anymore. Okay? But it's also not the physical movements of his hand or his body. There was misdirection. There was understanding. Magic and those arts is understanding more than its manipulation and all this kind of shit. Like the hand is quicker than the eye. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. That's the first freaking thing they throw at you so that you, right? You don't question the fact that just before he did the hand movement, he asked you a question. Right? Looked you right in the eye and asked you a question. Okay. Are you watching? Yeah. Okay. And in that moment, you weren't watching. Okay. So it's understanding psychology so that you understand how they missed that thing, right? It's weaving a story that captures the attention so their attention is not on the thing that you're doing. Right? So again, if we don't understand mechanically how to do the technique or what those basics are, for instance, right? People know the word kihon. Right? For a while, I was using the term, because I picked it up in Japan, kihon no kihon, right? Fundamentals of the fundamentals. But ultimately, a fundamental is it, okay? And Shoden no kata, a Shoden no, kata from the Shoden scroll or whatever, is not a fundamental. No, sensei. Sanshi no kata and kihon no kata, kihon no, the kihon no po. Those are basics. No, they aren't. No, they aren't. They're built from basics. Anybody that has my 0-point worksheet, right? I call it 0 point. I had no idea that Rob was calling his stuff 0 point, and I've known him for years, but I didn't know what he was doing, right? But my focus, and it's different, right? So there are all these things that have to be in place to actually be able to do the model. Chi no kata, sui no kata, ichimonji no kata, omotegyaku, onikudaki, whatever, right? As those models. We have to be able, before we can start working on them being street ready. Okay? The basics, Rob had a good analogy this past weekend, and I think it's because he plays the piano. I don't play the piano, so I don't use that analogy, but I guess I could. So we'll just borrow that one for the moment. It's like somebody learning to play scales, right? Ding, 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 right? On a piano, or I played the clarinet a long time ago, or whatever, right? You just do these just drills, because you need to be able to hit the key correctly at the right pressure, or you have to be able to put the finger over the hole correctly, or hit the lever so it opens, or whatever, right? And so you have to be able to play the notes. You have to be able to do scales, right? Well, I want to do scales. I want to do Mary Had a Little Lamb. Okay, because that's a basic song. It's a simple song, right? With a few notes. So you don't have to know a lot. You don't have to do quarter note, eighth note. You don't have to do these combination kind of things or whatever, right? It's a simple song, okay? But that's not a basic, okay? And Rob had a really good analogy to know the difference, okay? Mary Had a Little Lamb is not in any other song you're ever going to play. So it's not a basic. It's a simple song that's made up of notes and timing and, right? Okay. The things that come together to make Mary Had a Little Lamb, or that was another thing you had, the Saints Come Marching In, whatever, right? Those are the basics. That's what those things are built from. The better we get at those, the more we're ready for the next complex song. Proficiency with basics allows for complexity. The complexity is going to be needed to match the complexity of a bad situation. Somebody being pissed, shoving you and throwing a hook punch, and you do something simple and they put their tail between their legs and go away. That requires basics being applied a certain way, but that is a simple song. That is a simple self-defense situation, right? Somebody coming at you with more skill, or with the intent to beat, break, or kill you, not just blow off some steam, whatever. That's different levels of complexity. You bring weapons into play. You bring multiple attackers into play. You change the environment where you're between parked cars instead of an open space, or there's tree roots you could trip up. That's adding complexity. That's now, can your basics function in that environment, in that space, in that situation with that kind of, right? Ichimon's no kata, it's not a basic, right? It's a fundamental technique built of a few basics. Okay? Ichimonji no Kamae is a basic, because Ichimonji no Kamae shows up all over the damn place. Okay? Ichimonji no Kata is a simple song. At upper levels, I think advanced people should be looking at Ichimonji no Kata as an ideal, because it's a killing technique. Okay? But it's a simple, because I got to figure out how to get this to there across this space, because I just neutralized his strength and speed and all that by stretching him out. But guess what? I now have to make it back in there. And so, right? And as Manaka Sensei taught a long time ago, and he's still in the Bujinkan, the teaching structure is you learn Ichimonji no Kamae, and then you learn Ichimonji no Kata, and then you learn Ichimonji no Kata Henka, variations on the theme, right? And those variations are, how can I modify this that controls him in a different way that allows for ease of movement or whatever, right? How do I vary how this comes in so that, right? So what you end up having is less predictability. If you're less predictable, he's less certain. That means it's easier to surprise him. It's easier to disrupt his thought patterns, right? But just going through the motions, right? So anyway, again, these are not the same thing, right? So again, let me say it again. Sometimes we call something mystical because we haven't yet developed the capacity to perceive the mechanism, okay? If you're not already, I want you to think about that, right? A beginner watches a good martial artist avoid a punch, right? And it looks like magic. Okay? How do you do that, right? Maybe saw the shoulder, maybe saw the block, whatever, right? Maybe recognizes the distance, maybe felt the rhythm change, whatever, right? He just, okay. But how does the advanced guy do it? What's he looking at? Okay. How did he know? Right. Well, again, maybe he saw these different things. Okay. And then he exploited them. Okay. And to the beginner, well, that's intuition, maybe even magic, right? But to the experienced practitioner, it's Tuesday. Okay. I'm joking about it, but I've been using this phrase in class, right? Look, once you get to this level, he does his thing. You may not know half the things that you did because you just fit in with things, right? But I'm no longer freaked out by a punch coming at me. So my attention's not on it. My attention's on the arm or the body and how it's turning and things like that, right? I'm watching how this guy even is walking before he gets there, that kind of thing, right? That's what I mean by it's Tuesday or it's just another day, right? We'll do this thing and we'll just call it a day, right? What I mean is this became just like anything else. I walked to my car, open the car door, slide in, put the key in, or I push my little button thing, whatever, and I drive to the store. I'm no longer the student driver trying to like, did I forget something? Look in that mirror, look in that mirror, look in that. Okay. It's Tuesday. Well, what is it today? It's Monday. Okay. And the reason it's that is because they've seen it 10,000 times, right? So when any of these teachers say, don't try to get this now, right? What if he's not saying you're incapable of understanding my mystical secret, right? What if he's saying you don't have all the experiences necessary to understand what I'm showing you yet? Okay, that's different, right? Very different. Okay, because the teacher should, right? If you're making mistakes, then we stay at that level or we back down to the level, right? That's allowing that mistake to happen. Okay, I know. Ego wants more techniques. Whatever. Okay, how's it feel to want? So we get that so that we can get to the next level, right? Then we get that. So there's always something next. And what that means is you're working on something. As soon as you get it right, your teacher should throw the next level of difficulty at you. Not just another technique, another level of difficulty. Because if you can do that in this one and you understand what makes that work, then you should, no matter what technique now comes in, a little bit of exploration to make sure the moves are right, and then you start. And so the learning curve gets shorter and shorter. Most people think it's longer and longer because, holy shit, how do you learn all these freaking techniques? Start with one. Okay. But the missing stuff is drilling and coming up with drills and ways to practice things so that we can get the timing, so that we can get the distance, so we can manage pressure as it occurs and know, shit, that's too much, that's too little, that my hand's in the wrong place, touching him or whatever. Okay. But what's my litmus test? Okay, well, what am I working on? Am I working on defending, neutralizing the force of his attack so he can't get me, right? Or am I working on disrupting? Okay, not knocking him down, right? Momentarily putting him in a position so that even if he throws that other thing, it now can't reach. That's not neutralizing force. That's disrupting structure so that he throws the attack because you look like you're in range, but you're not in range. Okay, these are completely different things, right? That's very different. It's very different, right? And if that's the lesson, then catch the feeling doesn't mean try to remember exactly how Sensei moved. It doesn't, right? It means, because for some people, catch the feeling is Sensei did this thing and they were in awe and like, that's the feeling. No, right? It means pay attention to what this interaction feels like. What changed? What surprised you? Where did the pressure disappear? Where did you expect resistance, right? Where did a gap appear that now allows him to slip out, and you need to learn to close the gap, right? Again, learn to, or you expected something and then it wasn't there, or whatever, right? So there's lots of things, right? We can make drills out of all these, right? When did you suddenly realize you couldn't continue, right? When did you lose your balance and then tried to sneak it in there so that you could keep everything looking good, right? When did you become aware that Sensei was somewhere you didn't expect him to be, right? What was different about that moment? Catch that. Because maybe you can't reproduce it today. Maybe you shouldn't even try. Maybe if you try to reproduce it, you're going to copy the visible movement without understanding the conditions that made the movement appropriate, okay? And that's exactly what we talked about last week, okay? You're going to copy the answer without understanding the question, okay? So the point was, take this, whatever level of insight or whatever that you picked up, take that home, and even confusion, you take that home, because that's going to be the impetus for your training to figure it out, okay? You take it home and let it change your training. And look at this thing and you go, okay, look, where are things going off, right? So if I'm inconsistently hitting my angle with my kamae, then maybe I need to drill the shit out of my kamae to hit that distance, to hit shorter distances, longer distances, changing angles, those kind of things, to understand that maybe I don't need to step farther away. Maybe I need to step a little bit more this way, because see, what's really interesting with diagonals is that you may not think that you moved farther away from him, but from his perspective, it got longer, right? Where a second ago he was willing to take the shot, you took a step to the side, right? It changed the angle. Diagonal lines are always longer than vertical or horizontal lines, right? You take a horizontal or vertical line on a square, just take one of those lines, duplicate it, I don't care what, right? And then lay it on the diagonal, it'll always come up short. Okay? That's cool, right? So nobody cares what feelings were like when we were trying to take geometry or whatever in school, physics, whatever. Nobody cares if you liked it, didn't like it, whatever. What I always tell students is what? Now it's going to save your life. So you don't have to understand it geometrically, but it helps to get you there faster. Not that you have to take a geometry class. Okay. So again, it's just, we're looking to figure out ways to fix certain things, right? So I was going to talk more about how, training in Japan changes things and the insights that can pop up, but I'm not going to. Okay. So where I really want to go with this, with the meat of it before we wrap things up, is what do we need to do to test, to apply pressure in the form of either force or timing or variability, right? Like the uke can do more, okay? So that we can really understand what it means to go on a certain angle or whatever. I'm going to pick an angle here, right? Where it doesn't matter if he's taller than me, shorter than me, wider than me, heavier than me, lighter than me, or whatever. When I move to that line, because of what it does to the human structure, he breaks. Now he's going to fix himself very quickly, but I can at least do that first part. And then what can be added to that, right? But we need to drill that. We need to work with different body types or having our partner resist more and more until we understand that he can full-blown hold me in place, and we realize just how strong he is, except that he can't be that strong without locking his body in. And if I move to the right line, that goes all the way to his feet. Okay. But if I'm wrong, I can't do it from here. Sensei, he's being too strong. He's resisting too much. right? Or worse than that, I fear it not working, so I avoid doing certain things. Whatever we avoid doing, we have to hope to all that we find holy that that's not the problem we have to solve when the real thing comes. But this is Budo. It's going to come. And if it doesn't, well, then you had an interesting career at doing something that other people thought you were nuts about. Okay. So the hidden side of it is it's not all about techniques, right? If you're rolling, okay, can you change direction coming out of the roll? That's in Hatsumi Sensei's first videos that came out on Tokakura Yunitsu back in the 80s. Okay. They're rolling along a path and all that kind of stuff, right? And they're changing direction. They're changing direction sometimes by steering the hand going in so that this is the kyojutsu, right? It looks to him like you're doing a forward shoulder roll, but as soon as your body makes contact with the ground, you roll. There's a little hooking thing, and you roll off. You're not trying to twist and whatever. It just happens because of physiology, anatomy, right? Sometimes you roll straight over. Sometimes you hook in the other direction. Can you roll, and as you come up, unwind automatically facing the other direction, just in case he's chasing you down, because we're going to assume that when we're rolling away from danger, and he's tracking us, okay? Or am I rolling to get up on somebody, so I need to come out in a certain body position because it's a century takeout kind of technique or something like that, right? Can I change speed mid-roll so it throws off his brain's timing? Because when we drop into the roll, his brain automatically assumes and does that calculation to where he needs to be to meet you when you come out to jack you in that process. So can you speed up? Can you slow down? Can you steer in the roll so that it deviates? Okay? This is not just doing the same roll over and over and then, ego satisfied. I can roll. Okay. Or doing the same technique the same way against favorite training partner, throwing the same punch. Okay. Now, is there a phase for that? Yes. Okay. But at what point where will we change the attack to where it's not ski, it's a jab hook? Or maybe it is a ski, but your partner starts 3, 4, 5 paces away from you and walks in and then launches the attack as a part of this walking flow so that we get away from static starts. I'm not saying we need to go from static and jump straight into just randomized sparring, which people do, but you can see that what they end up doing during the sparring looks nothing like. Okay, so I get it. We all want to get to fight ability faster, but what we should be looking at is how can we work drills and work exercises and things like that that will help compress the time it takes to get there and not jump to trying to do things faster under more pressure. But our stuff broke. But it's okay, because like I said at the very beginning, right? We're only a step or 3 outside the cave, hardwired on the inside anyway. Anybody can drop back to caveman fighting. Okay, throw a little martial trick in that I learned in my system, but ultimately I'm still doing, same thing everybody else is doing. Right? The trick is to have more control sooner, right? And understand what the techniques are pointing at, or using them as a litmus test to test our basics. Because my guys have known for the longest time that for Nidan, for us, the litmus test is I have to believe that you can use taijutsu alone, not falling back on high school wrestling, whatever, to defend against some jackwagon on the street, not a lot of training, nothing like that, who throws whatever he wants. And, see if this sounds familiar, the student is able to string their basics together in an unbroken flow against what he's throwing. not trying to duplicate a technique or whatever. They're able to string their. Remember way back when I said all kata are nothing but basics strung together in a specific orientation. And the better somebody's ability is for what I call nidan, the easier it should be to see a new technique, duplicate the movement, and then start looking at the nuances for control and stuff like that. Because ultimately, everything is just basic strung together. Okay. So I'm not here to introduce drills. I've hinted at a couple of different ways to train, but that'll come later when we talk about the uke and their responsibility at different levels of their training partners' skill proficiency. So again, rather than stay focused on the obsession with techniques. Okay. And then, or we ask a question and then we're standing there waiting for the answer. Okay. What did he do? What was the technique? Which kata was that? Was that Gyoko Ryu? Was that Koto Ryu? Was that, okay? Trying to get from mechanics to dynamics to function, right? That's the important stuff. Now, if somebody doesn't, I've got a few friends that absolutely believe that they will never be attacked ever in their life. And so this is about body movement. It's about historical study, Togakure Ryu, this scroll, this densho, this whatever, right? That's fine. Okay. That's fine for them. Okay. All right. But so anyway, we need to look at these hidden sides. Oh, I promised to talk just for a moment about culture, because this is a hidden aspect of our training as well. Okay. Because guilty, right? I did it for the longest time as well, but in taking people to Japan and going to Japan and whatnot, and hearing war stories or horror stories about Westerners, vacationing in the East and stuff like that. And even with my time in the military and being stationed South Korea, what was then West Germany, going to different places and whatnot, and seeing Westerners, Americans, whoever, right, treating the whatever country it was, right, Japanese, native Germans, or whatever, right, like they were the foreigners and not the tourist being the foreigner. Okay. That made me not want to be that, right? So it was kind of my entry into what eventually rolls into Budo, right? And learning the culture, learning the etiquette, learning that kind of thing. So I can be a pleasant surprise rather than a foregone conclusion where they can just assume, they can just predict and be certain that I'm just going to be another one of them. Okay. So we have to recognize that when we go to a culture, right, there are a lot of presuppositions going on that which lead them to think a certain way and have certain beliefs about how things should be and whatnot, just like we have. Okay. And how that bleeds over into how relationships are experienced, how work dynamics occur, all that. Okay. This is no different for Budo. In Japan, there are certain assumptions about not just a teacher's responsibility, and it not just about the student will learn. The teacher will teach and the student will learn. Yeah, duh. Okay. But also what is not the teacher's responsibility to not only not teach, but to also not have to remind the student about. Okay. And there are certain beliefs and expectations in the Japanese culture that bleed over into the dojo. And I don't know if anybody's ever noticed, but in Hatsumi Sensei's class, master teacher's classes and all that, there is no freaking warm-up at the beginning of class. There's no exercises, there's no stretches, there's no line drills with punching and all that kind of stuff, right? There's no, there used to be, right, when people were at a certain level, okay, when Sensei was teaching them, and then we were punching makawara and makeshift things, put some hay up against a tree and wrap a big old flat sheet around it, punch and kick the shit out of that, because you were developing strike bite, but you, and again, we did it, but then they got away from it. Well, why'd they get away from it? Because Sensei's not running a belt mill where the new people coming in, right, he's going to keep teaching that. Nope. It's the people he's already taught. It's now their responsibility to teach the new guys. And when those new guys become more experienced, they'll be teaching the new guys so that everybody can keep moving and to the next level, right? But I think a lot of people, Westerners are very, very different, right? We were raised differently and all that kind of stuff. So in Western dojo, yeah, line drills are necessary. Okay, we're going to do this kamae, then we're going to do this kamae. We're going to work left side, we're going to work right side. Okay, everybody's going to do the same thing. You move back. Teacher can see if somebody's off, whatever. Things came up out of time. Same thing with stretching. Same thing, because the teacher tells me what to do, and I will do that thing. Great. But in Japan, there's lots of things the teacher will not tell you. What you need to research, what you need to practice, what you need to learn before you can even make sense out of class. Like a lot of people that come to training now, right, can't punch. And I don't mean it's ski. I mean, they don't know how the hand and wrist and whatnot, elbow, shoulder and whatnot should be when that thing lands and whatnot. So it's very difficult for that person as an uke to throw something that this person can grow from, not just do a technique against, that they can actually grow from. Okay. So, people are like, we don't do line drills. That's what they do in karate. No, that's what we do because people don't practice when they go home, or they don't know how to practice, or they don't know what to practice. But in Japan, there's no educating somebody on etiquette because the etiquette's all over the place. But for a Westerner, am I guessing at it, or am I learning it to understand it? Okay. There's no stretching before class. Now, that's not true universally. In Sumei Sensei's dojo and a couple of other classes, there were, but those classes were structured very, very differently. Very regimented. You maybe worked on one or two techniques the entire class. Most of it was practicing what you should already know. Like if they said, okay, we're going to work each of the sanshin, grab a partner, work each of the sanshin 5 times on each side, both of you, and then when everybody's done, we'll move on to the next thing. Then the teacher just watched or walked around and made a couple of corrections or whatever, but you're supposed to already know it. Well, how would I know it if I am brand new? Well, then one of the seniors might be assigned to you to take you to a corner, and today you're going to learn Chi no Kata, or they're going to walk you through all 5 of them, and then you're going to go home and work your ass off so that you can do them, and you can at least do them along with everybody next class, and then your training partner will go, no, it's this way, no, it's this way, okay? But you have the basic structure, right? It's not like, well, I'll just wait till the next class then when this comes up. There's a lot of presuppositions that they will not teach you because it's in that culture, it's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility to learn it, get the information, find it wherever you have to find it, figure it out. Because if you're not willing to do that on the front end, how can you be trusted with a lineage? How can you be trusted with a tradition? See, in the West, everybody wants to learn it, but we don't think about traditions. Some of us do, but not in the same way, right? Some of us don't even want to think about our family tree, right? Because we're afraid that it doesn't branch or whatever, right? But okay. But that's really what's happening, right? What if the master teachers are teaching a certain way, or Hatsumi Sensei taught a certain way, because there was an implied question? Can I trust you with this lineage? Can I trust you with this tradition? Can I trust you to learn this properly, to pass it along properly, as intended, correctly? Can you be trusted to do that? That's very different. Right? So, again, this is just another reflection or another perspective on why it's not about the techniques. The techniques are a tool to get us someplace, but they're not the point of the practice. There's this whole other side. And today I just mentioned drills and those kind of things. But anyway, so James, are you still on? Hopefully the glitch has been resolved or whatever. There he is. Ta-da! Well, he didn't pop up yet. He's black and white on my side. That just means you can't see him. There he is. Ding, ding, fries are done. Ding. Oh, sorry. That's a remember that old thing?
I do.
Anyway. All right. So questions, comments, complaints?
Alan had a question. Excuse me. He said,
It cannot be done from a comfy chair.
Well, he does start out with I'm not being a smartass. But
It's not possible. But anyway, go ahead. He thinks he's being serious, but I'm going to laugh anyway. Go ahead.
But as a warrior protector, if we were to encounter someone, encounter someone being attacked or abused, isn't it our position to intervene and help the victim or to dissolve the situation?
I can't answer that question because I'm not there. And as Nagata Sensei would have said, case by case. Okay. If you're fixed and you must, then you must accept the consequences. So I have a question for you. If you turn a corner and see somebody being attacked, are they being attacked because you perceive an attack occurring, right? Or are they on the tail end of a self-defense situation and you're assuming that the person in the dominant position is an attacker and the person in the submissive collapsing position or whatever is by default the defender? Okay. Are you looking at an arrest from plainclothes officers? I can go on. Okay. How many people are involved? Is the attack you're seeing, even if you're right about the attacker, is he the only one? Are there other ones that are hanging back in a car, whatever? Okay. What complications could come afterwards? There's a reason that our 8 phases are what they are. There's a reason that there's not just PTSD possibility after the attack. There's also dealing with possible legal consequences. Okay. So isn't it our duty too? Yeah. But there's lots of ways to help. See, a lot of people who get involved in martial arts assume that, the answer always has to be physical. Could I do a distraction that gets them to run off and then go help this person with medical aid or whatever? Could I assess the situation, realize, shit, there's a weapon involved, there's 3 people, that's above my threshold of where I've decided I will insert myself, and so I'm going to hang back, video record, whatever. I know it's going to look like I'm one of these other jackwagons, but I'm collecting evidence so I can be a good witness later. How are you helping? And this is a big part of what was covered this past weekend. Okay. Are you helping, or are you are you defending yourself or others in a way that provides for safety and security in the process? Or are you doing things in a way that compromises your safety in the process? What I mean by that is, punch comes in, I shift to kamae, and I do my counter, but I'm in range, and the next one takes me out. Or I move and I'm out of range, but I try to do the attack from here, but it's going to give him too much time, and he's going to be able to respond and all that kind of stuff, right? See, I'm not trying to not answer, but the duty to respond, this is where Leos falter. Not because they don't want to, and not because it's not their job, and not because of any of those things, but because sometimes training sucks. The powers that be with the budget don't put training in place. Or the training that's put in place is what I call CYA training, right? Covers your ass. Doesn't cover your ass, covers their ass so they can say that you were trained. And so they don't have to, so whatever. Okay. This is not as cut and dry as you can jump in and help anybody you want. Okay. But there's a ethical question that I ask advanced students. Because these little pop quiz dilemma kind of things are important. This is a good question, right? Isn't it our thing? Okay, great. Okay. And I'm going to ask one that some of you guys have heard probably heard multiple times. I know James has heard it, whatever. But let's say I see somebody being attacked, right? But I see a friend of mine, okay, family member, whatever, okay. Instantly, I know they're not trained, they're not capable, right? And so, right. But I've been doing this for a long time, okay. And let's say that I'm going to use one of my primary tactics, which is to not jump in, because I can end up hurting my friend, family member, whatever, because I came at it that way. But what if I move to an angle and I start yelling at this guy, hey, look at me, that kind of, to get his attention on me. And it's now an off angle and a blind angle, right? So if I need to, if my family member doesn't just go and run, I can go, run, get the fuck, you, look at me, call him names, all kinds of stuff, because I want his attention on me. Because now I can start de-escalating, I can start that kind of thing, or I can handle it, but it's less complicated because I don't risk tripping over them. Right? This is strategic thinking and tactical operations. This is way above and beyond just technical ding. Okay. This keeps us squarely within the 8 phases, gives you evidence of trying different things to not jump straight to, right? So the cops or the DA can't automatically make an assumption that, you've been training all this way. You wake up every morning looking to use this stuff, whatever. Okay. So, but I do this, and let's say I do this, and this person starts moving in on me, and my friend, family member, whoever they are, right, jumps this guy because my friend now assumes that we got a 2-on-1 condition. Okay. What do you do? Because I'm not going to ask, what do I do? I know what I'm going to do. What do you do? Okay. You can have whatever answer you want, remembering that you have to live with that answer. Okay. But my answer is not cut and dry because I just decided. My answer is based on original intent. So my answer is, as soon as my friend or family member jumps that guy, I go home. No, it's friend, family. You have to be there because it's because of blood, because of friendship, because of bros before hoes, whatever, right? No, I don't. And I'll tell you why I don't. Okay. That would normally be true. However, my intention was to save my friend, not to engage in a fight, because my first actions is to get them. Because remember what I said? Now I can start the attempting of de-escalation or whatever, or handling this thing. Free them up, let them get the hell out of there, right? I interceded to protect them. That was my intent. They used that to turn this into a, now the two of us, Jeff's here, he can kick ass, we'll just, you wouldn't have done that shit if I wasn't here. I am now being used for something that you couldn't do on your own. That's a difference between a warrior protector and somebody who's just good at fighting and will jump in to save their friends. Like if I get, like, a true friend is somebody that, like, you know, if you get in trouble, they're in the jail cell with you. I don't have friends like that. I think I've designed my life pretty well, that I've vetted people enough to know that anybody that I try to protect wouldn't do that dumb shit. Okay? But you can have whatever answer you want, because that'll be your answer. But remember, you can have whatever answer, whatever choices you want, but you can never escape the consequences of those choices. Okay? The moment this turns into a 2-on-1 thing and it gets misconstrued by witnesses, that's much harder to navigate for the rest of my life than losing a friend who will never talk to me again or whatever. This is why there is Taiden, physical training, Kuden, research, knowledge, understanding, perspective, those kind of things, and Shinden, life choices. See, most Westerners don't get this because Budo here, martial arts, has always been about what? Fighting, and who's the bigger, better, stronger, whatever. I'm not saying the Japanese don't have that or the Chinese don't have that or whatever. That's not how Hatsumi Sensei has passed this stuff on. Might there be times that I just have to jack somebody, like I can't, I'm yelling, hey, you look at me, and he won't, and I need to come up and pop in the back of the frickin' neck and drop him off my friend, grab him and run. Yeah. But see, I painted a picture that I'm doing this thing and it's working. Everything is good. You got your freaking freedom back. Get the hell out of here. And you make a life choice for both of us. Not consulting me. No. That's a hard no. Okay. So just so everybody's clear, right? I will help you. I will protect you, whatever, right? I will stand shoulder to shoulder with you and help fight off monsters in the fucking world. But I will not be used, manipulated, or whatever by somebody who is clearly weaker and out of their depth, but used so they get to feel like a... We design our lives to the power of our choices. Okay. This is the kind of warrior I was taught to be. And chose that, yep, this is good for me. Because if it wasn't, I'd be off doing something else. Earning trophies and beating the shit out of people or whatever. Yeah. So Was that helpful at all? James, anything come in on top of that?
Yeah, he said, I didn't look at it that way. I guess it's just the CO still in me, and I understand what
Yeah,
you're
you were in a
saying. I
cage,
was
dude.
just
You were in a
curious.
box. I get it, right? And this is what I was talking about before. There are decisions that were already made by you or by somebody else long before you had to make a decision regarding that particular engagement. We need to study these. This is another hidden aspect that techniques have nothing to do with. Techniques teach you what to do when everything else has failed, and here's an option for controlling the situation. That is so far downstream, all other options and choices have been removed, either by you or somebody else. And what I mean by you is you chose to be there when you had an exit, you had forewarning or whatever. But you took a job that was in a position where I get it. I get it. You are probably hardwired to step in, just like I was when I was a cop. But I wasn't usually caged in a cell, in a block on lockdown, or whatever. So we have to recognize the conditions. I get it. But you also have to recognize, just like I talked about earlier, when I was an Army cop, right? There was soldier mode with these skills and techniques. There was cop mode, same skills and techniques. There was civilian off-duty mode. Each one is different. Soldier on a battlefield, shit's getting ripped off of somebody. My shots are going to be kill shots, that kind of thing, right? Law enforcement, right? I can't leave, right? I may fall back. I may call for, roll one my way, roll two my way, whatever, right? Or I might have to hold it down and deal with things because I can't get to my freaking radio, or the first thing this jackass did was grab my mic and whatnot and rip the damn thing out. So shit, right? Or I'm just trying to protect my sidearm and whatnot as I'm doing things, right? But generally, not a good idea to run whatever, okay? You can take cover if there's gunfire and stuff like that, but you've got to manage the situation, right? And use of force, all that kind of stuff, right? Legal liability, those kind of things. For a civilian, some of those things apply. Some are more loose. Some are, okay? So, and again, depends on where I live, right? I carry some kind of weapon. But if I lived in some other Western country, it wouldn't be an option. So I'd have to have other options. I'd have to be approaching things differently from there. So anyway, again, it's much more involved than just, and this is the responsibility of the student. Okay. What kind of situations could I find myself in? Right. What am I willing to do right now? Okay. Now, once I make that decision, research isn't over. If this goes sideways, how bad could this be? If it goes well, how good could it be? Great. What negative can come out of that? Wait, what? For instance, I defend somebody or myself against somebody. Turns out to be a gangbanger, right? Whatever. Picture ends up in the paper. Name of a certain town. Shit, they may even put your freaking address in there. Whatever. Media generally doesn't care. Okay? Or where you work or whatever, right? And now his friends and family want to come visit. Because they know he's a jackass or they know he's a criminal or whatever, but then so are they. And so they just think about retribution because, right? They're allowed to hurt you, but you can't hurt them because if you hurt them, well, then they, we're back at being 6 again. Okay. So this is what Hatsumi Sensei often talked about with things being like a heavy responsibility. Okay. That anything is possible in with regards to an attack or self-defense or whatever, right? So, and again, right, I'm not teaching you how to defend against a person. I'm teaching you how to defend against the unknown. The more of those unknowns you can be thinking about and at least have some general plans for navigating those things, the further ahead you're going to be. Just like if I'm moving, right? If I'm always waiting for the next shot, right? That one comes in, I go over here. And I wait for that one, and I go over here, right? This came up during the training during the weekend, but, we've been trying to get this across to some of my advanced people that, like, this thing comes in, right? And I move to this position. He winds up to throw that next one, right? And he does that when I do my uke nagash, and I move this foot over, but my head stays right here. So where's he throwing the next shot? Right here. But the beginner has to learn how to do that because the beginner has been moving the whole body every time they step. Okay. As opposed to stepping here and then a little shuffling step that looked like, shit, your face just came closer, right? I just helped him decide where that next shot was. So when he comes in and I shift, I'm moving my flinch response will move my body to that other foot I've already positioned. And I don't have to move extra pieces to go there, right? So what I'm pointing to is even the physical techniques and the proficiency, the development and proficiency point to preparation for the next thing before you need to do the next thing. Again, it's not a densho. Not in the techniques. All right. And often the stuff in the makimono is kind of poetic or references and things like that, but they're not spelling things out. Okay. A lot of these things you get through Kuden. Ta-da! Right. And they didn't mean the podcast when they wrote the stuff out. It means you're going to be given this by your teacher in different ways, right? Think about these things. Hatsumi Sensei very rarely, in my experience, said, I want you to think about this. He would make references to things. He would make references to this particular poet in his writings or this person, whatever. People, okay. I think the assumption for a lot of people is that, well, the teacher did all the work. He'll just tell me. He'll tell me what's important. He'll tell me what the lesson is so I can pass the test, that kind of thing. No, he's dropping little breadcrumbs. Go read that. Go study this thing over here, right? Dogen's haiku about da-da-da, right? Dogen. Who the hell is it? Dogen. The ability for us to do the research and things like that faster today, there should be time compression going on for people getting to the next level, right? As long as they're not expecting to be spoon-fed by the teacher. So anyway, James, anything else?
No, sir. That was it.
All right. Well, hopefully this was beneficial. I apologize. This went longer, whatever. So anyway, don't forget or remember, whichever one works for you. Fall intensive. I'm getting away from calling things a camp because we don't go to camps and everybody and their brother's calling things a camp, right? I'm probably going to get away from using the term masterclass too. But anyway, the fall warrior protector intensive lessons, hidden lessons from the sword, right? October 16th, 17th, and 18th. You can get a bit of information right now at the onlineninjaacademy.com. It's right there. Look at that. It's right there for those of you watching. /events with an S, events. So that's on there already and more information to follow. But we have an early registration thing. You save the most right now. I think it's $100. I think through until August 1st. After that, goes up to the next tier, and after that, it's full pricing. Okay. So that's it. I've already had a couple of people doing breakout sessions and whatnot. As a matter of fact, Christina Major, her Sensei Major, her breakout session this time is on why it's really difficult and impossible in some areas for us to train this art because we're not Japanese. I think that'll be very, very interesting. Right? I'm excited about that one. Right? So anyway, we'll post more as they come up and all that. But anyway, and then I am looking at dates for next year's Japan trip. So as soon as I have those, I didn't post those already. No, I didn't. I know I didn't. Right. I'll get those up because I'll give people plenty of time to look it over and determine whether or not, it's worth it for them. And look at the places we're going to be going, what we're going to be studying, that kind of stuff. And we don't just do homebrew classes. That's not a slight on anything. But again, because of all these parts of training, culture, and all those kind of things, that's why I do those things. Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you, James. Again, I will talk to everybody again next time on, Trent already said it in their head, on Kuden.